You're a yummy chicken kebab, and I'm here to tell you, history often rhymes. History is actually repeating right now, friends. I'm going to show you this clip starting with Lawrence. We're going to speak about the theme of AI, crypto, and the world economy right now. And I'm going to tell you, okay, stock market's high. Many people are looking at the stock market going, whoa, it's so high. The PE ratios and everything. It's actually not high. Okay, it prices in the future. It knows stuff that you can't see right now. When we get more releases of these AI retail-friendly products, our minds will start to blow more. Okay, and actually what's been happening, friends, is, as you know, the great debasement trade is starting to catch wind, almost like the money printing theme. It might heat up next year. Hope it does. So the great debasement trade, I've spoken to this for you many times, okay? That's why a lot of people, like even my friend Mr. Slug Coin, literally the most kindest, friendliest slug, okay? Some say he's a snail sometimes if he's carrying his home on his back. A lot of you have been learning, friends. You're wondering, like you're spinning your wheels. You're wondering, like, how come we're kind of making a bit more money, but we're going nowhere? And now you get to see why. The real inflation rate, this is about 7.5%, around 7.5 to 8%. But they're telling you in the Kippy it's only 3. They're basically rorting the system. Now, they've done this before. And I remember, friends, literally, it's like we're in such a similar outlook. In 1942, we went to war with the Austrian painter, World War II, the guy with the mustache. And then they had to pay off the war bonds. So what did the government do? They sold bonds to the public. They did yield curve control, which is probably what the US Fed's going to do next year. They're not going to do a QE, even though it's all money printing. It's all the same stuff. They're going to do yield curve control, YCC. I've made many videos about this, but just to refresh your memory, what they do is there's different bonds with different durations. They manipulate the bond. Okay, they basically, they do QE, but they buy one of the bonds, and they just keep a big fat bid there. Okay, with QE, they're actually hitting market. With this, they're leaving a bid. Okay, so Mr. Lawrence is just going to explain that this has all happened before. Let's listen.
A lot of costs to do. We actually did it well in World War II. A lot of cost to run that war, and we printed the money, and we grew the Federal Reserve balance sheet, and we put in yield curve control. And the reason it didn't result, and we had very high inflation. Most people don't know it. There were some months in the 1947, 48, 50 area where inflation was running 20% year on year. Okay, it was really bad, and bondholders just got totally annihilated. I mean, they had the yield curve control in place, and long-term bonds were paying 2.5, and short bonds were paying 0.3%. So they all got killed. But the point I'm making is that what got us out of that without that debt burden is that over time we had a much better demographic situation. We had the automobile, or we had growth in the country expanding in terms of both housing and the interstate highway system, and we grew out of that.
So it was a wonderful explanation there. You got to see, friends, when we came back from the war with the Austrian painter, World War II, right? The government, central bank, they're like, well, someone's going to have to pay off this debt. So back then, you had no financial literacy that could even be explained. There was no YouTube. Cars were made out of wood. Everybody had monotone gray skin. Mothers were basically breastfeeding their kids and just squirting out plutonium enriched breast milk. It was a different time, back then. Remember the ladies, friends, that had the beehive bras, the very, very pointy titties. It was just a different time, okay? And they could very easily control, manipulate the population. So, but this is the great tragedy of the commons was, why was the public willing to do this? Well, in 1929, you had the silent generation get crushed by the Great Depression. Everyone lost all their money, 90% drop, soup lines, unemployment rate 15%. So everyone came in, and people who wanted to invest, no one wanted to touch the stock market. So they were happy to go in bonds because you're getting a guaranteed dog shit 2% yield, as you just explained. But they were inflating at literally 10% per year on average. Some years, in some periods, it was 20% inflation annualized. Can you believe that, man? You get absolutely destroyed. So in this 10-year period, they got the debt down from 130% GDP down to the debt GDP ratio from 130% down to 60%. They got it to a very, very healthy level, but who paid it? The middle class for 10 years. For literally 10 years. Lost all your wealth. Only the people who are willing to take risks, they actually crushed it. That's why you and I are in crypto today. Yeah? So they're debasing. So that's why, how was everything able to be okay? How were they even able to do this? It was because, as you mentioned, the productivity increased, right? Yeah, the industrial powering on of the economy. That's why what we're seeing right now with AI, it could be the same thing. Remember now, we have population problems, but we can replace the population gap with AI agents, because now AI, right, it's making everything really productive. Like superhumans, right? They don't sleep, they don't eat, they don't fart, they can't whinge at you. You can abuse them all day and they have to take it. So when it comes to AI agents and all of these things, yes, we solve for this immigration issue that everyone has, and it makes everyone like power up the economy. That's what everyone's banking on. That's what all the billions of dollars of investments have come. But remember, friends, it's the game is still corrupt, right? That's why they're debasing at 8% per year. And that's why a lot of people are worrying, like, oh my gosh, is there going to be this record inflation? Probably not. There's probably not going to be this hyperinflation that, say, Peter Schiff and everyone's calling for. Yeah, because technology is super deflationary. So you're inflating, but the technology is basically removing the need for all these massive amounts of workers and making the economy more efficient. So they're trying to balance it out. Obviously, there's going to be cracks in the system and stuff, right? But that's why nominally stock market's going to keep pumping up. And that's why we've been waiting this way. It's been very depressing for altcoins because we've known this for 5 years, but I've literally known this since day one, but just takes time for the market to reprice. Don't forget, friends, in the 2008 GFC, so this is important to know, crypto is the answer, okay? Crypto is the answer. Look at this, the Real Housewives of Wall Street. Why is the Federal Reserve forking over $220 million in bailout money to the wives of 2 Morgan Stanley bigwigs, okay? So what's happened is, back in 2008, friends, this is literally true. So the Morgan Stanley chairman, his wife, okay, she was able to call up the Federal Reserve. They gave her a $220 million loan when all the GFC things collapsed. And she got a very low interest rate. And she just bought up all the assets. Bought up stocks, the S&P 500, bought up houses, real estate, God knows what else. Yeah, just bought up all the cheap assets. And it was all guaranteed by the US Fed. Talk about corruption, man. Literally. Complete corruption. This is how the rich get richer every year, because TradFi is for corrupt insiders. Crypto is the answer. So that's when it comes down to, friends. So you see this is all why it's kind of funny. In the wake of that, that's why Satoshi even made Bitcoin in the first place. So now you get to see all of these things get put together, right? So if we're trying to imagine what does the next 5 or 10 years look like, obviously they're debasing the crap out of the currency. And that's why, like, I know everyone's calling for 4-year cycle to finish, but man, like, it's just like the amount of money printing they're doing is insane. In 2021, everyone called for extended cycles, so they refused to believe in the 4-year cycle. Remember? I was here. Remember? Even Ben Copen had lengthening cycle theory, LCT, made like 40 videos on it. He believed the cycles were lengthening. Everyone was calling for an extended cycle in 2021. And then we got the worst case. The 4-year cycle peaked exactly on the 4-year cycle mark, which is 1,064 days from the bottom. Hit like whatever, November 7, and it was all over. Okay, no one really confirmed until like 5-6 months later. By then it was too late. So back then we had a 4-year cycle. Everyone wanted it extended. Now it's actually opposite. That's crazy, man. The crowds, they're funny. Now everyone wants the 4-year cycle to be here. They clicked out. They're calling for lower. Taiki's short. Everyone's short. You name a KOL. Short. Blockchain backer short. Everyone's sold. Interesting. You know, and now they're saying, oh, you know, you're silly. There's a 4-year cycle. I've got these circles that say everything's going to bottom out. You're going to get destroyed. We'll see. Crowds are funny. I'm still holding long and I'm willing to go down with the ship. Very interesting, right? So history's rhyming. Is AI going to be able to power us on? I think so, man. Everyone's calling for a bubble. You know, even Tom Lee tells us many times. He goes, look, man, Tom Lee lived through 3 major bubbles. He goes, every single time at the top, no one wanted to call it a bubble. No one. Yeah, and all you hear right now is that everyone's saying AI is a bubble. So I think we got longer to go. Like, subscribe, belly button, or catch you in the next one.